guys, welcome back if you're new here. My name is Becca and today I'm going to be giving you some big book recommendations. I believe a couple of weeks ago now I posted a video on how to tackle big books, the best ways to read big books and make them less intimidating. At the end of that video I did mention that I had been asked to make a video on my big book collection, and I asked you guys what big book videos you would like to see from me, whether it was a recommendations video, a TBR of big books I really want to get to, or whether it was my entire big book collection. And you guys said that you wanted all of them, so all of them will hopefully coming. I'm going to stagger them out a little bit, but I am going to be starting today with big book recommendations, big books that I've read and I really love. So before we get into today's video, I would just like to let you know that this video has once again been very kindly sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform that has thousands of classes that cover a very wide range of topics, including creative pursuits like photography and illustration, and also things like business management, marketing, and how to set up your own business. The class that I recommended to you last month focused on essentialism and how to be more productive. You have to prioritize. The class that I would like to recommend to you guys today is a little bit of a follow-up on that. It is called Productivity Today: Managing Attention in the Digital Age, taught by Kevin Siskar. One thing that I have found, especially over the last couple of weeks, is that it is very easy to get sucked into social media. This class teaches you a little bit on how to get away from that, how to manage a to-do list and make sure that you get everything done and avoid distractions from your notifications. Now, I have already started implementing some techniques that I've learned from this class, including learning when to put my phone down. I have now started to instill a midnight Twitter ban for myself because I found that getting sucked into Twitter after I put my book down for the night when I was getting ready to go to sleep was keeping me up into the early hours because I was just constantly scrolling and did not know when to put my phone down. Skillshare is a very valuable resource. It is completely ad-free and all of the classes are taught by industry professionals. However, it is also extremely affordable, as if you take out an annual subscription, it works out at less than $10 per month. Now, of course, I understand that a subscription-based service can be a little bit daunting if you are unsure that that service is right for you, which is why I'm incredibly happy to tell you that the first 1,000 people who click on the link down in my description box will receive completely free access to Skillshare Premium for a 2-month period. Across that 2 months, you will have unlimited access to everything that Skillshare has to offer, and it won't cost you a single penny. So if you are somebody who is looking to further yourself on social media, looking to start a business, want to pick up a new skill, or even if you're just interested in trying out a new hobby, I would definitely recommend that you take me up on this offer and find out whether Skillshare is right for you. I am going to be recommending to you guys 5 big books today. I did a deep dive into my Goodreads and I pulled out some big books that I haven't spoken about very recently. All of the books I'm going to be recommending today are going to be between 500 and 650 pages. So they do meet that criteria, but they are not the biggest books I've read and they are definitely not the biggest books out there. But one thing that I did notice when I was comprising this list of books is that the majority of big books I've read, you guys do not need me to recommend them to you because they are so popular. They are the basic fantasy books that a lot of people recommend, so I'm just going to run through them now really quickly. So first up, we have all of the books in the A Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. This book is over 750 pages and it is one of the smaller books in the series. I believe the biggest one is either A Dance with Dragons or A Storm of Swords, and they are around 1,200 pages. A couple of others are any book by Brandon Sanderson. The ones that I have read so far are Elantris and The Final Empire. Both of these are over 600 pages and The Final Empire is currently my second favourite book of the year. And another really big book that I absolutely love is, of course, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This is the first book in the Crescent City series. This one, I believe, is exactly 800 pages. It is my favourite book of the year so far by my favourite author, and I do have a spoiler-free review for this book, which I will link up here if you guys require any more information or want to know what I thought about this. So my recommendations today are going to go in order of the amount of pages they have, starting with the smallest, ending with the largest, and my first recommendation is going to be The Beast Player by Naoko Uehashi. This is 512 pages. It is a young adult fantasy that has been translated from Japanese. I believe that there are 5 books in the series, and then there is also manga that carries on the story, or it's also been retold in standard manga or something like that. This book was published in 2018. I emailed the publishing company at the time and asked about a sequel that they said was in the process of being translated and was supposed to be released this year. So this is a very slow moving, very atmospheric coming of age story that follows a girl called Elin. Elin's mother has a very important responsibility as she looks after some enormous warrior serpents that are very precious to the kingdom. One day, some of these warrior serpents are found dead and Elin's mother is blamed for it. So her mother sends her away to protect her, and from there we really just start to follow Elin's life. She ends up in a couple of different places, but along the way she meets a royal beast, which is this big winged wolf almost. It's very hard to describe what the royal beasts actually are, and these animals are designed to protect the queen, which is why they're called the royal beasts. And Elin discovers that she can not only communicate with the royal beasts, but she can actually communicate with the warrior snakes. Now, if anybody knew this information, it would make Elin extremely valuable, so she does try to keep it a secret to protect her and the royal beast that she has become attached to. I found the story to be incredibly atmospheric, incredibly moving. It is very emotional in parts, and I do think it calls into question the relationship that humans have with animals. At what point do you just leave them be in the wild, even if you are a compassionate person, even if you only want to care for them, if you don't want to imprison them, but how your ability and your interaction with animals can then endanger them. This story also reminds me very much of a Studio Ghibli movie. When I was reading this, it played out like a Ghibli movie in my mind, and I do think that does contribute to the reason why I love this so much. But if you like really picturesque atmospheric stories, if you like East Asian fantasy like I do, then you may want to consider picking this one up. Next up we have the Tailing series by Erica Johansson. Now this is a book that I read a very long time ago. I'm coming up to my 3rd anniversary on BookTube soon, and I read this series before I started BookTube, but I believe that this is either adult or young adult depending on where you're from. In the UK it is classed as adult, so that is what I'm going to be referring to it as. But in this story we follow a young woman called Kelsey. Kelsey is the princess of this kingdom, however she has had to grow up away from the crown because her mother was assassinated. So when she was a baby, her mother sent her away and she has been in the care of foster parents. She's grown up in the countryside and her uncle has been holding her seat for her. This story starts off where Kelsey comes of age and she heads back to her kingdom to take control, and there she finds out that her uncle has not been a great ruler and has been sending slaves to a very powerful neighboring country that I believe is called Mortmesnay, so that the very mysterious, very powerful queen will not attack them. This series is very slow moving. It is a very slow series. It also has some sci-fi elements in here that I really did not expect, and I do think that that is one of my favorite elements of this series. I can't remember at what point you discover the sci-fi elements, but it may not be in the first book, but I just remember being completely shocked and not really grasping that this is what this was going to be. There are a couple of clues sprinkled throughout that make you think like, wait a minute, is that really what I just read? But I did love that clever sci-fi twist to what for all intents and purposes appears to be a medieval fantasy. The main character of Kelsey is deeply flawed and also a little bit morally grey. As I said, it has been a long time since I read this series, but I do remember her often making very bad choices, making selfish choices, and being led astray by various powers. So if you are looking for morally grey main characters, then you may want to check this out because of that. One thing I will say about this is that the ending of this series is incredibly polarizing. It is one of those endings where you don't want to read on because you have a feeling what's going to happen, but you just cannot tear your eyes away from the page. I fall into the camp that I believe that the ending of this series was absolutely perfect. I don't think that this series could have ended any other way, but it is definitely a very bittersweet one. And this book does come in at 512 pages again, but it is the shortest book in the trilogy. Next up we have one that I have read in 2020, but I don't talk about it a whole lot, and that is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mihurin. This one is a young adult enemies to lovers fantasy romance that I was a little bit iffy about at the start, but I ended up really enjoying it. This one is a dual perspective and we follow the perspectives of both Louise LeBlanc and also Reed Diggory. Now Louise is a witch who has fled her coven and is hiding out in the city, pretty much living as a thief. And Reed is a witch hunter. Now the witch hunters in here do tie into religion, so there's like a religious order and all of the soldiers are witch hunters, and there is historical historically a lot of friction between the witches and the witch hunters that has been going on for centuries. This book starts out with a series of events where Louise and Reed keep coming into contact with each other. He has no idea that she is a witch, but she knows full well that he is a witch hunter, and they keep encountering each other until it gets to a point where they meet once again and Reed detains her, and they end up getting into a little bit of a scandal as they tussle, which makes the leader of the witch hunters force them into a marriage to save Reed's reputation. This book has a historical French setting. I believe that the French in here is inaccurate and that the way that the sentences are structured is a little bit unnecessary because it'll say something in French and then repeat it in English, but I just really like enemies to lovers stories. Essentially, I like the dynamic between Lou and Reed. It's kind of a similar dynamic to Nina and Matthias in Six of Crows, which once again, if you're looking for big books, the Six of Crows duology are both over 500 pages, and I feel like I really enjoy stories like this where a character has been indoctrinated into a regime they've pretty much never known any different, and something happens or someone happens to them that causes them to question all of the things that they believed in and leads to them being a more open-minded person, I guess. I also really like the main character of Lou in here. A lot of people do tend to say that she is a generic YA protagonist. I do kind of get that, but I like how she's fiery. I like characters that don't do what they're told, especially in a book and a system like this, where women are very much told what to do by men. When Lou marries Reed, she's expected to be treated like his property and do whatever he tells her to, but that is really not her style, so I really do like the dynamic between those two. What I will say about this is that the plot is not necessarily predictable, but the way that everything ties up to lead into a sequel is exactly how I expected it to. It's a classic structure of how fantasy stories wrap up to lead them into a sequel. It's a hard thing to explain. The ending was just a little bit tidy. Everything fell into place exactly how I expected it to. And in terms of things like plot structure, it is not the most original story. However, it's a fantasy romance. I enjoyed the romance in here. I enjoyed the atmosphere of the medieval French inspired setting, and I'm very excited for the sequel to this, which will be released in, I think it's August. Into the ones over 600 pages, the first one I have is Night Film by Marisha Pessl. This one is 602 pages and it is an adult thriller. The majority of this book is just regular text, but we have a lot of web pages in here, and there are also a couple of newspaper clippings and police reports and things scattered throughout. So I believe that this is still my favorite thriller I've ever read. I did give it 4 stars. It's the only book in this video that I have rated 4 stars as opposed to 5. So this book follows a disgraced journalist called Scott. Scott has a little bit of a vendetta against a cult horror movie director called Stanislas Cordova. Prior to the start of this novel, Scott receives a tip that Cordova is not exactly as he seems, and then he pretty much slanders Cordova on national television. Scott obviously gets sacked for this, so he's now out of work. His reputation is ruined, but he's still convinced that there is something going on with Cordova. This story begins when Cordova's daughter is found dead in an abandoned warehouse. Her death is ruled a suicide, but Scott, with his vendetta against Cordova, does not believe this. He finds everything just a little bit suspicious, so he does start to dig into what actually happened to her. This is a story that is definitely told in 3 parts. I liken the structure of this book to the structure of the Hazelwood. We have a normal-ish section at the beginning where it is very much like a thriller. The middle section of this book is a really wild fever dream, and the end kind of returns to reality, but it has a very different tone to the beginning. One of the main things I really like about this book is really straightforward. It was just really compelling. I am generally of the belief that thrillers shouldn't be too long, like 300 to 400 pages is my ideal thriller length, but this kept me compelled for the whole 600 pages. As Scott was turning over pieces and pieces of information on Cordova, it really made you question him. He is definitely an unreliable narrator because going into this you know straight away that he has a vendetta, so everything that's going on with him is a little bit biased. However, as you go through the book, things do get a little bit weirder piece by piece until it leaves you questioning whether this is a straightforward story or whether there's a hint of the supernatural in here. Now, the reason I gave this 4 stars instead of 5 is that I do not believe that the last 50 pages on this book is needed. The story does obviously come to some sort of conclusion, and I thought that the plot twist near the end of this was amazing. I thought that everything just kind of fell into place. Everything made perfect sense. However, it does then continue for 50 pages, in my opinion, unnecessarily, and turns out to be a little bit speculative, and I wish that those 50 pages had just been cut. But I am also somebody who does not like speculative fiction. I don't like speculative or ambiguous endings, so having that last 50 pages and a speculative note on the end of a really great book just really annoyed me. Regardless, I would definitely recommend that you pick this up. I'm not a huge thriller reader, so if you're not either, I still think you may enjoy this, and it's very compelling and a little bit twisted. And then the last book that I'm going to recommend to you guys today is one that I do not have with me. I lent it out to a friend and he still has not returned it. Honestly, no tea there, he just hasn't read it yet, so I don't have a physical copy. And that is the Wind Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. This one comes in at 644 pages, and considering I just said to you guys that I don't like speculative fiction, if you have read this book, if you are aware of Haruki Murakami, you are going to wonder why I am recommending this book. So this is a magical realism story. Haruki Murakami is a Japanese author. I believe all of his works are translated from Japanese, and he does write a lot of books about cats, actually, now thinking about it. So this book starts off with a man whose cat goes missing, and honestly, from there, this book is just a wild ride. It has so many crazy elements. I believe that reading any Murakami book is a trip, but there are just so many different elements in this book that I don't even know how to actually summarize it. Essentially, our main character's cat goes missing, and he sees this as a big turning point in his life. He was a normal man, he lived a normal life until his cat goes missing. Now, he is not particularly attached to the cat. However, I think it's his girlfriend, I'm not sure if they're married, his girlfriend or wife is extremely attached to this cat, and as soon as the cat goes missing, it sets off a whole chain of events. His wife slash girlfriend leaves him, and he becomes fixated on getting this cat back, and everything is about getting this cat to return to his life, because he believes that if he can do so, his life will return to normal. The actual contents of this book are wild, and it very much walks a line between reality and surrealism to where you don't know which is reality. There are instances in this book of a strange woman ringing him that he's never spoken to before, who then begins to initiate phone sex. There are weird hallucinations in here. There's some really weird sex stuff in there as well. There's whole periods of this book where he's sat at the bottom of a well, and I don't even know what was going on, to be fair. In hindsight, still never really worked out what was happening down the bottom of that well. And right in the middle of this book, there is a 40-page chapter where a man comes to his house and tells him a really long war story. So this is not going to be a book for everyone. Haruki Murakami is definitely not going to be an author for everybody. But if you like surrealism, if you like your books a little bit weird, if you don't mind ambiguity, then I do think that you may enjoy this, because there is so much going on as well. It is a good book to read as a big book, in that you can very easily break it up into chunks, because a lot of the time it is a series of instances. So like, this section is dedicated to a war story, and then this section is dedicated to him sitting at the bottom of a well. So if you are struggling to read big books, if you need something you can break down, you can kind of read it in each separate instance and then try and figure out how everything connects. You may struggle. I struggled. For some reason, I really enjoyed this book. I do think I really enjoy Haruki Murakami's writing, and I do like how his books are very mundane but also really weird. I don't know, because I don't normally like this type of fiction. I don't like surrealism, magical realism, ambiguity, speculative fiction, but for some reason the Wind Up Bird Chronicle works for me, and that is pretty much all I can say on the matter. So those are the 5 books that I am recommending to you guys today. Please let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. I will probably make a follow-up to this video at some point where I recommend you guys 5 more big books. I hope that anyone who wanted me to make this video has found at least one book from this list that they haven't read and would like to try out. But that is about it for this video, guys. So please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find links to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as links to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.